Today we're going to look at some data and how to get more out of it. I got a Garmin watch back in December and I've been recording an astounding amount of data with it. And because I have this data, I now know why it is that so many training programs either burn out, fail, or whatever it is. They just can't produce the results that you want and as in the time span that you're looking at. I'm going to be looking at some of the reports in Garmin, and then I'm going to go a little bit further than that to show you how you can get more out of your data in Tableau. The biggest problem with fitness is that people want their results really quickly. I'm looking here at 4 weeks worth of data, and if you look at this amount of work, you're gonna see that I'm staying mostly at the same speed. And a lot of people, they want to see improvement relative to their effort. So when they're putting in all this effort to run on a daily basis, or close to a daily basis, they want to see improvement in weeks, not months. When I look at the average over 6 months, well, it's not, I gained maybe half a mile per hour, right? So this can be kind of disheartening. But you see, this one is pretty exceptional over here. I have one run in June, but that's an outlier. I think the main point to take away over here is that when you're looking at too small of a data set, or when you're looking at, well, not enough data to tell the whole story, it's going to be difficult to figure out the value of fitness. So instead of looking at this, and we can even look at this in like the average heart rate, right? Even my average heart rate is really not changing so much. It's getting lower a little bit, but this is not nearly enough to justify what's the distance that I've traveled in this time period. So I've done an extraordinary amount of mileage in this time period. And I want to show you what that looks like inside of Tableau. The first step to this was downloading all of my data, and I'm going to keep scrolling down so that it loads up all of my activities for the last number of months, right? And then after I load up everything, I can export it as a CSV, and then I'll be able to see my data. Now, what I've done with this is that I cleaned this up. I added some extra dimensions and calculations, took out a bunch of the data that I don't have, and then I put it inside of a database. I put it inside of a database because that's, you know, that's just how I roll. So if we take a look at, what did I call it? Garmin running biometrics. So if we take a look at this database that I built, I have a bunch of my metrics. I changed my pace into a speed. So you see I have a pace over here, and I changed that into speed in the database, because these miles per hour turns into graphable charting a lot better than minutes per mile. And I did the same thing for the duration data. So I had a bunch of this duration data that I transcribed into the database, because there was, in Garmin, they track your, let's take a look at one of these. They track your minutes per heart rate zone, which is probably the most valuable thing they do in the whole thing. Time in zones is not something that comes out on the report, but this is one of my main metrics over here. I want to see how hard my heart is working according to my heart rate zones, or along the journey of, on this day I went 20 miles. And what does that mean? If I'm looking at the, second to second microdata, I'm not certain that I can learn a whole lot from this. I mean, it's going to be pretty much as expected, right? So as the elevation goes up, or as the duration changes, oh, actually my heart rate's pretty good over this whole time. Well, you know what I mean. As I'm going lower, my heart rate will go lower. And or at least later in the run, my heart rate will be a little bit higher as I'm climbing. So yeah, this heart rate zones is going to tell me how many beats per minute my heart is doing throughout the entire duration of the workout. And I put that inside of here as a minutes per zone metric, as well as the total number of minutes per zone. And then I assigned a dominant zone based on whichever zone had the most amount of time in it, or if zone 5 was more than 15% of the total zone time, total zone minutes, then that would be the dominant zone. And each of these workouts comes with a description, right? So if I'm running in zone 5 for more than 15% of my workout, I'm going to count that as an anaerobic workout. But if I spend most of it in, let's say, if I spend most of it in zone 4, then this will be a intense aerobic. Or if I spend more of it in zone 3, or which I didn't over here, but if I spend more of it in zone 3, then that would be a moderate aerobic. Right here. So I spent most of my time in zone 3, that would be a moderate aerobic. And it's pretty rare for me to actually have an easy aerobic day, because I have to purposefully run very, very slow, which is so frustrating. But I think the main thing that I wanted to show you is that, okay, the Garmin gave me a bunch of valuable data too, right? So I have all these metrics over here, but that only tells part of the story. I wanted to tell more of it, which means that I had to go a little bit further than what they provided. I had to add on some additional metrics on my own, and I wanted to see, are the shoes making a difference, and what type of length are we looking at for the run? Am I doing 5K, 10K, or am I doing more than 10 miles? Where am I running? All of this makes a big difference. So I connected this this database, my wonderful local host, over to Tableau. And let's take a look at my training for this past year and what you'll be able to learn from this. And if I use a live query, I'm going to continually send these questions back to the database. So I'm going to create an extra step. Sorry. Okay, so I have a bunch of data over here, and let's start to create a view. make whenever I do an extract, you save the data in a .hyper file because you're making everything go into the Tableau database, into its hyperspace engine. Alright, so we have a lot of measures and dimensions. I want to use this dominant zone as a dimension, and the rest of this I think we can group this up to make this a little bit easier for ourselves. So I'm going to group up these zone metrics into a folder. I'm going to add this zone time, total zone minutes over there. Then I think I'll leave the rest of this. That should be fine. Okay, so first thing I want to see is, let's take a look at this report for average speed. How is my speed changing over time? Could use the date time as a continuous field. I'm going to add in my average speed. And if you look over here, I have a bunch of slow runs over here where actually I started walking with my kids in the evenings. So I'm going to do something, I'm going to filter out this data over here. So if I'm going less than, I don't know, 3.5 miles per hour, I'm going to count that as a walk, okay? Because this data is going to count against, is going to pull down my average. So I'm going to look at the sum being less than 3.5. Alright. If I'm going fast 5.1 miles per hour, I'm still, you know, jogging. I'm still, well, relatively running. It might be an easy run, but it's still running. And now when I'm looking at the trend, I don't want to just look at the average. Okay, if I pull the average over here, I got an average over the table of 6.2, but this doesn't really tell me what I want to know. I want to see how is this changing over time. And my speed is increasing. Yeah, my speed is increasing. So speed changes over time. And I'll put some notes over here. But this is something, right? So what I wanted to show you guys was when you look too close. The problem with looking at fitness too closely, or when you're in the very beginning stages, is that you don't have as much data to decide if it's effective or not. Let's say we're only going to look at 1 month at a time. And I started this new habit of running daily, and I couldn't see the benefits from it. So if I'm looking at 1 month of data, I ran every single day, but I saw no improvement over this time. And even if I continued it on to another month, I got sick and I was bedridden for a little bit. my speed decreased over this time period. So this is all things that could be extremely disheartening. Let's say even we're looking at 2 months of data. 3 months of data and I'm only seeing maybe a quarter of a mile per hour speed improvement. This is the type of change that will make people say, alright, you know what, this is not worth it. I think the biggest value in Tableau is when you get to look at the variables together. So let's duplicate this speed changes over time. Or actually, you know what? Not even that. Let's take a look at... So this is looking too close. And I'm going to leave the date in there. So my speed didn't change, and that's going to be disheartening. But if I take out this trend line and I'm going to add in another metric to give it extra context. Let's look at my distance along with it. I'm going to change this into a dual axis. Change the miles into a bar chart. And change maybe the opacity over here. Oops. Change the opacity. When you have a characterization like distance to show you what maintaining this kind of the same average, you know, you're not increasing in speed, but you're going further than you could have possibly imagined. This is where you're going to get the value inside of your data analytics. And if I look at the running total, and I add this over to the labels, you're gonna see that with 1 month I've gone from running, you know, a couple times a week to doing distances in a month that could get me halfway to Vegas from LA. So maybe this is looking at, so this is a combo chart, speed and miles. So when you're looking at the speed and the miles, it's going to be way different than just looking at one thing or the other. And something else that I'm going to be able to demonstrate some value with for you guys is looking at this elevation gain. So most of January I was training on the treadmill, and it's only relatively recently that I started being able to train outside and tolerate elevations on a regular basis. So even looking at mileage, so if we look at the trend of mileage over time, trend of mileage over time, and I can leave this be because I have a lot of exceptional times. You know, I had like a weekly or bi-weekly, no, what looks like a weekly long run, until relatively recently with coronavirus have been locked indoors a lot. But this can be characterized by the elevation. So if I'm going to look at elevation on another plane, And I'm gonna make this into an area chart so it looks like mountains. That's pretty cool, right? Let's turn my elevation into green. And let's leave my miles as orange because I had it as orange on the other map. So you see, in the beginning I didn't have a whole lot of distance going for me, but over time I've become very accustomed to a lot of elevation, which is going to make me stronger in the long run. And if I'm just looking at the speed that I'm traveling in relation to the miles, that's not even going to be enough of the story. So we have our speed in miles, right, which doesn't change a lot over time, especially if we're looking month to month. But when we're looking at the big picture and the elevation, so let's go miles and elevation. There is so much that you can learn from your data. So in just like your miles and elevation, let's see if we're going to be seeing, if we're going to, what this looks like on the month-to-month basis, if we're going to be able to see a benefit. Actually, you know, mileage isn't even something that people can see a major benefit in over time. This chart, I mean, it has, if we look at the miles as a bar chart. So these are all flat miles until I get to this first long run at the end of January. Or in February I started to do more with my training. March even I started to run outside more, and which got me more elevation naturally on a small scale. You know, 137, 400 feet. And when I came back to living in a hilly area, my elevation gain changed significantly, even though my overall mileage was lower. And one last thing I wanted to show you today was, okay, about the heart. So I have all these metrics, my speed, my mileage, the elevation. I wanted to see how my heart is working through all of this. And if I'm just looking at the heart rate over time, and let's, you know what, take out those same walking measures. I'm going to apply this to everybody using this data source. I don't need to see the data for walking. Okay, pretty good. So my heart rate actually hasn't even changed so much. And this would have been a big, the average heart rate hasn't changed that much, and this would have been a big shock to me, considering all the work that I put in, if I didn't do the work to transcribe the time I spent in each heart rate zone. So the time that my heart spends in each range of beats per minute is going to give me the quality of data that I need to show my performance over time. So this heart rate zones, let me see if I can show this to you guys properly. I'm going to show my heart rate and my max heart rate. My max heart rate on the same axis. Okay? So any given workout, I'm going to have an average heart rate, I'm going to have a maximum heart rate. But the way that this works, that heart rate zones work, is that depending on what range of BPM you have, so this is heart rate, BPM. Depending on the beats per minute, you're gonna be able to see if you are working in an aerobic heart rate zone, meaning your heart can keep up with the demands, or if you're working in an anaerobic zone, meaning that you're going to run out of breath soon. I'm going to add a distribution band to the data on the table level. And what this is going to be based on a band. Reference band. I'm going to create a parameter called range 2, and this is going to start at the bottom of my range 2 heart rate, which for me, I'm going to pull this up on my phone. Starts at 112 and it goes 112 up to 129. So this would be easy. I need to edit this later. Okay. But this will go up to zone 3, which starts from 130 beats per minute, and it goes up to 148. This will be my moderate aerobic zone. Oops. And let me edit this to be filled with blue. To edit the name of this to be zone 2. So if I'm in the blue zone, my heart is working pretty easy. I want to add on more reference bands to the table, and this is going to go from zone 3 up to a new parameter called zone 4. Zone 4 starts at 149 beats per minute, and it goes up to 166. And this is going to be filled with a green. I'm going to add another reference band to the measure values to show you where from zone 4 to zone 5. Zone 5 starts at 167 beats per minute, and it goes up to the heart rate max, the maximum of the heart rate max. Oops. And this is going to be filled with this orange color over here. So these are the aerobic heart rate zones. If I'm working in a moderately aerobic pace, most of my heart rate beats per minute will be in this range. when I'm getting close to this anaerobic zone, from 149 to 166, this is how hard my heart will be working in zone 4, high or intense aerobic zone. Then zone 5 and above. So from zone 5, oops, zone 5 until the measure value's maximum, it's going to be filled with the red. Danger zone. So when you're in the anaerobic zone, your body's going to tire out real quickly. And this is where you start to get sore. So if you're spending your workout in this zone, this is not going to be sustainable. When you spend more of your workout in aerobic zones, this is sustainable. So if I want to show you this data in terms of heart rate zones, and this is what I captured over here, my minutes in the heart rate zones. I'm going to make a stacked bar chart. So let's look at the daytime. And I'm going to start adding some zones in here. And you know what? I'll do let's do this date time. I'm going to still look at 1 month at a time because I don't want to flood you guys with data all of a sudden. So I'm going to add on the measure names in here. Measure names to the here. Measure values over here. I'm going to take out everything except for the stacked zones. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make this a bar chart. Measure names is going to be the color. And whoops. You know what? Let me try this all over again. Okay, so the measure names is going to be the color. Right. Measure values. Oh, did I get this to show? Alright, let me try this again. So I'm going to put my measure names to color. Measure values in here. Nope. Okay. So I'm going to filter out the measure names. I'm going to add the measure values in for the continuous date time, and we're going to make this into a stacked bar chart with the colors being, let's look at something with similar colors to what I was using before. So zone 5 being red, orange, green, blue, and gray. We can do that gray. And then I want to reorder these. And let's just look at one date at a time, or 1 month at a time. So over time, you can see that the quality of my work is starting to change little by little. I'm spending more time in the green zone over here on long runs, and I'm spending less time in red zones overall. And this changes month to month. So if I'm going to show you guys January or March compared to January, you're going to see more time spent in the green zone and especially in April, I spent a lot more time intentionally in the blue zones. And this is what it means to train and see value from deep understanding inside of your data. I'm going to show you guys more about this next time.